Sorry for taking some time.
No problem.
Okay, I think we're live. Sorry for taking some time.
No problem.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. I'll start again. Basically, today I want to talk about fundamental aspects of supply chain, talk about supply chain management, talk about possible pain points. By pain points, I mean possible issues that is being faced every day by supply chain managers. Sorry. My agenda for today, I'll talk about what the supply chain is. I'll talk about the supply chain system and how each part of the system interacts with each other. I will talk about controllability versus flexibility, and I'll also talk a bit about the importance of inventory. First and foremost, I think we have to understand what a supply chain is. A typical definition will be that a supply chain is a network of organizations that creates, produces, and distributes and delivers value to the end customer. But I think a more in-depth definition will be like supply chain is the creation and delivery of value to end customers. It starts with the supplier and ends with the customer in mind. So now, in the aspect of supply chain management, we have to understand what do we understand by value. Is value just based on the company side, or value just based on the customer side? Because we can look at it from 2 points of view. In supply chain, we define value as utility over cost. By utility, I mean a certain product. How much happiness does it bring to the customer? How much satisfaction does a particular product bring to the customer? Then we say it's utility over cost. It being over cost means that it's value is inversely proportional to cost. By that, I mean the more valuable a product is, means it costs less to the company to produce, and it gives more utility to the customers. This is what we consider as value in supply chain management. Now, I would like to take some time to explain the different systems that exist in supply chain management. So basically, we have 4 major players in supply chain management system. We have the suppliers, which with S. We have the manufacturers, we have the distributors, and we have the customer. Basically, every product starts with suppliers. Suppliers produce different essential raw materials, or not necessarily raw materials, but products that could be brought together by the manufacturer, then is distributed towards the customer. A good example of this, we can look at iPhones, for example. For us to get an iPhone that we use daily, the company Apple, they have to bring different resources together, which are their suppliers, which are mostly in China or Taiwan or the Philippines and all those places. They have to bring different resources together, like the motherboard, the casing, and all that. Then also in China, for example, they bring all these products together to create an iPhone that we use daily. After bringing everything together, then a distributor is now sends the product to different places around the world who use the iPhone. In this first 3 aspects, we can classify, we can say that the major goal in this aspect is efficiency. That means efficiency is more important than utility in this case, meaning that companies are more focused on reducing costs and optimizing processes in these first 3 stages. When we branch out to the customer and we're now looking at how to give this product to the customer, how to satisfy the customer needs, then we care more about responsiveness. Responsiveness is more or less utility or customer satisfaction. So with this, I can say that a good part of supply chain management, we're talking about efficiency, And the last portion, which connects to the customer, we're talking about efficiency, sorry, responsiveness, which is obviously customer satisfaction. With this, we can redefine value again compared to how we defined it in the previous slide. Instead of value being responsiveness, or instead of value being utility over cost, we can say value is responsiveness, which is directly proportional to utility, and efficiency. How efficient you are is how well you can do something at minimal cost. So we can say efficiency is also inversely proportional to cost. I can give another example of a company that's of how a company will use supply chain management. Let's say our HP laptops, for example, it's still the same thing of taking resources from countries like Taiwan, um, China, and all the likes. Then another company assembles the product together. Then the main company of HP, Hewlett Packard, they distribute it to their different supply chains. And I would like to also explain for each aspect of supply chain management, there are different tiers. By tiers, I mean there are different levels to each of them. We have different levels of suppliers, we have different levels of manufacturers, we have different levels of distributors. So each company has a supply chain, or we could say a value chain, since it's the movement of value from the supplier to the customer. Each company has this, and its ability to control this is usually where a company makes most of its profits. Its ability to have high efficiency, which is being able to do the task with minimal cost, but at optimized levels, and also being able to satisfy customer demands, customer satisfaction. Sorry. Being able to balance these two is the main point of every single company, whether big companies or small companies. Being able to balance between efficiency and responsiveness, being able to satisfy customers at minimal cost. This is the most important aspect of supply chain management. So going further from controllability and flexibility, there are two concepts that are counterintuitive, but they're also very important to supply chain management. We have controllability and flexibility. A company's ability to perform tasks efficiently, a company's ability to perform tasks with minimal cost refers to its controllability. Controllability is directly proportional to efficiency. That means if a company knows how to produce a particular good at minimal cost, it has mastered the art of producing a particular good, you can say they have high controllability of these goods. And it's usually very good for companies to have this. But the issue with controllability is that it comes with repetition of tasks. If you continuously do a particular task for a long period of time, you are going to get better at that. But the issue with getting better at that is relating to our next topic, our next concept, flexibility. Flexibility is the company's ability to respond to uncertainty. That means something happens in the market, customers' demand shifts, or something economic happens, example, COVID. A company's ability to respond to that is a flexibility. Now, the problem with this is that if you have high level of controllability, that means you have mastered the repetition of certain tasks. Whenever something comes that could affect that, like something uncertain, let's say, for example, a shift in demand. A company produces 40 goods monthly, then the shift of demand goes up to 70. The company won't be able to respond to the situation. It not being able to respond to the situation, it leads to customer dissatisfaction. So being able to control your processes and being more efficient, it's good. But if you're not flexible, if you're not flexible, uncertain events could destroy the company. I think a lot of companies were highly affected with COVID, for example. So being able to balance between controllability and flexibility is essential for every company. Being able to do your tasks at optimal levels with minimal cost, at the same time being prepared in a way that you be able to satisfy customer demands, be able to satisfy customer specifications, and so on. I think being able to balance these two is an issue that we still go through every company, and balancing them is what makes or break a company. Then I would like to go to one of the main problems every supply chain faces, supply chain or value chain, or each company in the supply chain process. They all have a problem with inventory. What is inventory? Inventory basically is a buffer against uncertainty. What does this mean? For the example, like if a company produces 40 goods every year, every month, sorry, it produces 40 goods. Then something happens, an unforeseen event happens, and we have a demand of 70. If the company has inventory available, it means that it will be able to satisfy the demand with that inventory, and it won't cause too much customer dissatisfaction. So when there's an increase, a spike in demand, inventory is useful, or any other uncertainty. But the problem is having the right amount of inventory, because demand is just one aspect of this. Also, you could have issues, like you could face issues in your company. And if you continuously have enough inventory to cover up your problems, you won't be able to do a root cause analysis. What's a good root cause analysis? Whenever you face an issue in your company, a root cause analysis is an analysis that you use to find the exact causes of every issue you have in your company. If you're not producing enough and you always have inventory to cover that insufficient production, you will never realize that the problem they're having is they are not producing enough, for example. So you must have the amount of inventory that is not too much to always cover the problems you have in the company. Also, a bad effect of inventory is that inventory has costs. You have costs to maintain every amount of inventory that you have monthly. If you keep too much inventory, your inventory cost will be too much. Also, another problem with keeping too much inventory is innovation. For example, a company, let's say a distribution company, has 1,000 iPhones. If the company keeps on adding iPhones in the expectation that the demand will continue rising, when the next iPhone comes, before that company can buy more iPhones, they have to finish this particular demand. And your other competitors have already switched to this new iPhone, and you continue using the previous iPhones. This is going to cause you to lose lots of customers. Even from the aspect of production, if you have too much inventory or too much parts, whenever there's supposed to be an innovation of the product, whenever you're supposed to change something about the product to make the customers more satisfied, or let's say there's a new trend going on, you have to sell everything first before you can jump along with the new trend. The issue with this is that you have competitors who are jumping on the trend immediately. These competitors are not going to wait for you to come into the market. So you're going to lose a lot of customers with that. In inventory deployment methods, there are 3 basic inventory deployment methods. Like if we go back here, yes, we have our supply chain like this. Every product is moving from the supplier to the manufacturer to the distributor and to the end customer. So as I said, we have 3 basic deployment methods for inventory. Our first method involves push. That's the name of the first method. In this method, for every step in the supply chain process, we produce extra. We produce more than that is necessary. Let's say we have, instead of giving 70 parts here, we give 100 parts, and instead of giving 100 here, we give 120, for example. This usually leads in having excessive inventory, and we know that the problem with excess inventory is that we don't have proper innovation. We can't innovate our products easily, and we have problem with costs. The second inventory deployment method is pull. Instead of in this way that we're producing more than is necessary in each case, in the case of pull, we start from here. We see if there's extra need from the customers, like extra demand from customers, we ask from the previous period for more inventory. If this also has a problem, like we need more parts, we ask from um the previous player for more inventory. This is actually very compared to push, it's usually more efficient than push. But the only problem is since you are asking backwards, you're going to be going backwards. It it's not going to be as fast as push, or you're not going to be able to produce as much compared to push. So they have trade-off on both of them. And the last inventory deployment method is contingent or intelligent inventory deployment method. This usually relies more on using demand forecasting methods and inventory optimization methods to find out the exact amount of inventory that will be able to maximize profits generally. And this, sorry. And this is the one I will show you today using linear programming and demand forecasting. Firstly, what is linear programming? Linear programming is like a method used to optimize processes. You have in each linear programming method, you have an objective you're trying to meet, and you have certain constraints to each of those objectives that you want to meet. So in a linear programming method, for example, using Python, we can make the variables go on every possible outcome, and then we see which one maximizes or minimizes our objective. We can have objective of maximizing or minimizing our objective function. While demand forecasting, demand is the amount of products we expect to sell. A forecast is like a prediction based on previous historic data. There are many forecasting methods, but I use a specific forecasting method known as exponential smoothing. In this forecasting method, it puts more weight to present sales than previous sales. I can show you both of them now. Okay. Okay, instruction. Okay. 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 Um, yes. So I'm going to show you exponential smoothing. Okay. Basically, we have our time series. A time series analysis is an analysis based on we have changes that are occurring in time. In this case, our sales, and this is our time axis. Time is on the x-axis, and sales is on the y-axis. So using exponential smoothing, it takes into account every change that's happening in this time series over time. It takes into account the more recent sales, it puts more weight to this, the more recent sales. And the previous sales, they also have an impact, but it reduces the amount of impact it has is exponentially as time goes on. Meaning that as time goes on, it's more likely things that are going on right now are going to happen compared to things that happened long ago. So this is our forecast for the next 12 months, which is a year. This is the forecast that we got for one of the products I did. So the other method I'd like to show you is an inventory optimization method using Spider, Spider is basically is a platform where you can use Python for different purposes. But here I'm using it for linear optimization, linear programming. So to understand linear programming, as I said, there are two aspects. We have the aspect of our objective function, and we also have the aspect of our constraints. Constraints are like certain things or certain objectives that the optimal value cannot go without. For example, you can say a constraint is you have two products, you can only produce one of them, or you have this certain amount of budget in a month, and your budget can't go above this. So let's look into a typical optimization model using linear optimization. Firstly, it's usually going to start from a period. This is period 0. Your inventory in period 0. It's most production planning periods start with a specific inventory, mostly 0, but I didn't put a number here. So for each month, you have how much is best you produce for each month that would satisfy this demand, and what is the amount we're leaving for next period. Let's say we have a 12-month period, that's a year. We then say we start with 0 inventory. We want to make in a way that we also end with 0 inventory. So what's the best amount to produce every month? What's the best amount of inventory to have every month that would optimize our function? So let's go back to the Groovy. Okay. So now we have a variables where we store certain values for each month. The amount we want to purchase for each month, we store them in variables. Then we have variables for our inventory. We store that in variables as well. Then we have our objective function. Our objective function in this case, this is our objective function. How much the production costs, the amount we produce for each period as well. In this case, we want to minimize the amount produced because production has costs to it. Then we look at our constraints. Our first constraint is based on the initial inventory and the initial production. Like, I hope I put. Let me show you here. Okay. In this place, we realize that the inventory of the first inventory 0, and the production T must be the same as this demand and the inventory of the next period. Meaning you must satisfy this demand with your inventory and your production, and you have leftover inventory if that's the best case scenario based on what the model decides. Then we do the same for the rest of the periods, and we have constraint here saying that our final inventory must be the same as our penultimate in the inventory. That means before the final period. So if this is a function in Python, like it puts like pockets of programming code. So the values that I would need based on the diagram I showed and based on the constraint I've used, I will need values based on demand for the next few periods of time, the production cost for each period, and the production cost for each period, the holding cost, the initial inventory once, and final inventory. If I run this program now, it showed me some optimal values for each month, how much I produce in each month. And the objective of this function is to minimize costs. If I make a change, let me try and say we must start and end with 0 inventory, you can see the solutions change. If I say, okay, you must end with 10 final inventory, the solutions change again. So this is how you have this is how you use linear optimization to optimize your inventory using constraints set to a specific objective function. Let me go back to the okay. Now I would like to just have a summary of everything I've said. Firstly, supply chain management is important, it's essential to our day-to-day life, it's essential to everything we see, everything we use on a daily basis. There are four major players in supply chain: the suppliers, the manufacturers, the distributors, and the customers. And inventory is a very important aspect of supply chain. Making the correct inventory decision could make or break a company. Effectiveness and responsiveness are two very important aspects of supply chain management. Being able to balance being effective and meeting up to customer demands and requirements is very important. Every company must try and find the right balance between controllability and flexibility. As we saw previously, controllability is related to being effective. The more control you have of your processes, and flexibility is related to responsiveness. The more you can bend and adjust based on customer demands. And the most important aspect, I would say, of supply chain is that we must produce value. We must make the value get to the customers, and we must meet customer satisfaction and try to minimize costs. Thank you.